Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your models will practically build themselves. Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv. Welcome to today's show. Today we are going to look at a new method of painting figures that I'm borrowing most of the technique from Sprues and Brews. I've talked to you about that channel before. He puts out some great content, and he's got a way of painting figures, faces particularly, that is pretty quick and easy. But here's my disclaimer. If you can paint figures, you can paint figures. If you suck at painting figures, you can practice, you can use techniques, and you'll get better. But the ability to turn out a really good figure, I'm sorry, in my opinion, if you've got that talent, great. I do not have that talent. So you're going to get to see, and you've seen in some of my other figure videos, how I go over, use different techniques to come up with the figures that I use in my modeling. With that said, we're going to look at this new method that is just a few very simple steps and turns out some pretty good results. Today we're going to look at the faces, the face painting. In a few weeks, in another installment, we'll look at the uniforms, and when we do that, we will be using the new AK, which, by the way, on the faces, we're also using 3rd gen AK paints, and for the uniforms, we're going to be using this set here. So, once that's all done, then we're going to put together a couple of dioramas, and well, we'll see how things go. So stick with Mad Dog Merv as we look at a new way of painting, well, a new way for me, of painting the faces of figures. I have a tutorial in one of my other videos, I'll try to link it in the description, on how to make your own wet palette. Mine, I made it a couple of years ago, and it works very, very well. No, I don't have a refrigerator out here in the doghouse, so it doesn't go into the refrigerator, but it does go in this sealed Tupperware container. And this is only the second time that I've put a new parchment and sponge, so to speak, in here. It definitely stays damp. The only problem is, after a while, you do get some mold, mildew. That's why I had to get rid of the other one. But it actually stays pretty viable, and it will keep the paint. For example, this is a flesh tone that I used a couple of days ago, and it's still, I can see that it's still wet. So anyway, if you want to check out that link to make your own, it's some paper towels, some parchment paper, and a nice resealable, nice Rubbermaid airtight container. So there you go. Alright, so let's kick this off with, I'm going to use the highlight flesh from the AK face paint set. And what I do, these are going to be some resin heads. I got these are Hornet heads that I've just super glued on a piece of plastic, and then I can put them in my little holder here when I'm done. Anyway, so I've got my wet palette. I put in some a drop of paint. I'll wet my brush just a little bit, and then I'm going to paint. And we'll try to get this to where you guys can see it. I'm gonna, with it just watered down just a little bit, we're gonna glaze over the face here. Now it's going to be a little thin, and we're probably going to have to come back a second, maybe even a third coat. But I want it thin. And you can kind of see how it looks there. We'll put him down and do this other one. All right. I usually prime my figures with a black primer, and what I like to use is the Mission Models black primer. Sometimes I'll spray it, but most of the time I will just brush paint it on, as long as I put a nice thin coat. Okay, we'll put him aside. And this is dry enough. I'll put one more coat on him. And there. Okay, put them aside to dry before we go on to our next step. Put a second coat on this guy. You can kind of see how he looks. There you go. All right, next step. For the next step, I'm going to use some of this Vallejo wash for rust effects. A little in the wet palette. I'm using what I consider to be more of a medium-sized brush for figures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this entire face a wash. And it's going to turn him kind of orange. I want to get this down in cracks and crevices and just kind of all over. You can see where we're at there. Okay, next one. It kind of gives the flesh a warm tone. We'll wait a few minutes for this to dry before we go to the next step. So for the eyes, which is what I'm going to do next, I like to use this navy blue. It's a Model Master acrylic. Any kind of a nice iris color will work, but I prefer the darker blue grays. And I'm not going to put this on my palette. I'm just going to put a little bit on my brush. And I'm going to put a little teeny dot right in the middle of his eyeballs. And yes, it's harder than it looks, but there you get, it's difficult to see, but you've got some eyes in there. That'll give him some life. I don't use white anymore. I tried that, and no matter how much I worked it, did all the other little techniques and whatnot, there was still just too much. Okay, and I know you won't be able to see that, but he has some eyes too. Now, there's two ways that I've tried to do this next part. I will show you this one first. It seems to be my more favorite. So I'm going to take this, I don't know what the heck it's called. It's an angular brush. It is, well, you can see the info here. Okay. And I'm going to get it wet. There's just some water in here. Get most of the water out. Get into my flesh color here. Get the brush saturated. And now I'm going to dry brush. I am going to dry brush the face. Be better if I hold the helmet. Okay, with the with the dry brush method, you can kind of see that it's brought out the details. Now, a couple of little areas where the paint got knocked off, if you will. I'm going to take my fine brush back and just hit those highlights. bridge of his nose. His ear. Okay. There's that one. Now the other method is to just use this fine brush here. This is a 5.0 by Abdun Highland, whatever that is, 502. This is the fine brush that I use. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of water to my paint. And now I'm going to hit the highlights of this face. We start with the bridge of the nose. Forehead area. Cheeks, just areas that would be highlighted. Chin. Again, I'm trying to get just a thin layer of paint on here. And then some of the area on his neck. Leaving some of the warmer areas, particularly around the eyes, lips, under the nose, and parts of the neck. Okay. Now I can go back and hit any areas that I feel I need to touch up with the wash. So I'm going to do that real quick off camera, and then we'll get on to the next step. On this next step, I'm going to take some of this good old stuff. I don't know what it's called this week, but if you have it or can find it, great. If not, some kind of an acrylic gloss coat would be sufficient. And then what I'm going to do, you can airbrush this step. I'm choosing to brush it. I'm going to take this on my brush and lightly go over the face. This is used as a protectant for the next step. So he's going to have a nice gloss finish. Again, I'm doing it very lightly. Do not want to have a buildup. or brush strokes for that matter. Okay, now for the next step, and I'm going to show you guys two different ways on how to do this. So, the guy with his mouth open here. This is the way I was shown. This is this is very new to me, and I'm not 100% sure I like the results, but you can judge for yourself. That's why I'm doing this. So this is an enamel wash from AK. It's kind of a grayish colored. It's for armor, for NATO vehicles. It's kind of a grayish color, and it's not bad, but it is an enamel. I'm going to use my medium brush, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it on our soldier's face, his whole head. Oh no, yikes. We've kind of ruined him. Maybe. Maybe not. Wait for our next step here. Oop, knocked my water over. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this AK odorless thinner. Odorless enamel thinner, and then I'm going to use my fine brush. I'm going to dip it in there, dry it off so the brush is just damp, not wet, and then I'm going to go in, and on the highlights I'm going to pick up this enamel wash and remove it. From the highlighted areas. I want the wash to settle into the nooks and crannies while I am trying to remove it from the higher lighted areas. Takes a little bit of work to do it, but now you can see the result. See if you like that result or not. It's not too bad. The second way that I've tried to do this is with a concoction I call Larry's Bathwater. I'll try to put a link in the description if I remember. One of my very early videos talks about how to make your own pin wash. And we call it Larry's Bathwater for a reason. Basically it's water, dish soap, and a very dark gray, like a grimy black is the best. And it's an acrylic, okay? So we're going to try that on this face here. And again, you want it to settle into the cracks and crevices. And pretty quickly, you can see how he looks with that so far. We'll come back in a few minutes as he dries. All right, so now on the one that we used, our acrylic wash, I'm going to start out with a Q-tip. I'm going to dip it in water. Get most of the water off there so it's just damp. And I'm going to lightly brush by the highlights on the head. Just removing from the highlight, or from the high spots. Now you can do it this way, or you can use one of your brushes, or a combination of the two. To pull it out of some of the areas that you may not want it. Okay. There is the one with the acrylic wash. Now the only step left is to, if I'm happy with it, go over it with, airbrush it with some of this matte varnish. We'll come back and look at it once that's done. Okay, so we've got some of this varnish here, this matte varnish. Load it up in the airbrush. And I'm just going to spray face and helmet and all that fun stuff. Try to not puddle it up. Put him there to dry. You know, we want to make him nice and flat and protect him.
Here's the finished product. There's a little bit too much of the black around the top of his nose. I'll have to go back and fix that. Same with this one here, otherwise not too terribly bad. And then I did these four Japanese figureheads as well, and you can see how they turned out. Now the black that I used, the black wash I used on this one was Larry's Bathwater, the acrylic wash. And you can kind of see this one I'm probably going to have to go back and redo most of it. Not happy with how that one turned out. And this one didn't turn out too bad. A couple of little blemishes there that I got to fix. So, all right, folks, thanks for joining us in this, and we'll see you in a few weeks for the uniforms.